When you get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
What if the biggest tragedy in hip-hop history never actually went down the way we were told? That one question has haunted fans, investigators, and reporters for nearly 30 years. Because when you really start digging into what happened in Las Vegas back in September 1996, the holes in the story aren't just cracks, they're wide open gaps. We've always been told Tupac Shakur was fatally shot in a drive-by, clung to life for 6 days, and was quietly laid to rest. But from the second those Vegas lights came back on that night, things stopped making sense. First off, there were 0 arrests, not one. Even when a man who claimed to be connected to the shooters came forward, nobody ever faced trial. Then there's the cremation. It supposedly happened within 24 hours of the announcement, so fast that even close friends said they never saw the body.
I feel satisfied. I don't feel like I've ever embarrassed myself or my people, in nothing that I've done. And yet, I got the whole world fearing me, you know what I'm saying? At 23, weighing 160 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even started. I haven't even wrote my plan out yet, and they scared. I got the vice president know who I am, the president, every cop in every city.
And to make things weirder, key evidence just vanished into thin air. No coroner photos, missing hospital files, and the crematory worker who handled the ashes. He retired the very next day and disappeared forever. That whole sequence sounds impossible for any regular person, yet somehow it slid by in one of the most publicized cases in music history. The official story says the case went cold because the streets stayed quiet. But insiders claim something way deeper was going on, a plan to vanish, set in motion long before a single bullet was fired. That theory exploded again in 2018. A former bodyguard named Michael Nice came forward, and he wasn't just some random internet theorist. His background tied him to political movements and private security gigs. Nice said he worked with people connected to the Black Panthers, the same movement that influenced Tupac's own parents. According to him, when word spread that a hit had been placed on Pac, a secret team was formed to get him out of America, and Nice claimed he was part of that wild mission, a covert escape that changed everything. He told reporters that Tupac was secretly flown out on a private jet from Nevada to Barbados, disguised as a medical evacuation. The body left behind? According to him, it wasn't Pac at all. It was a stand-in arranged through someone inside the hospital. And the wildest part of it all? Nice claimed the entire mission was approved by none other than Fidel Castro himself, who allegedly agreed to hide the rapper in Cuba under one strict deal: no public appearances, no confessions, and complete silence forever.
Humans are not just good and bad, black and white. They're compassionate at times. They're at times. A man can be and compassionate to women at the same time. I was. Look at the lunatic and look at Brenda's got a bed.
Nice said he had both audio and video proof, including tapes of Castro confirming the setup. But right before he could drop the evidence, Nice was found dead in December 2018. To the people who believed him, that wasn't some freak accident, it was a message, a clear warning to anyone thinking about exposing the truth. Nice had even said it himself. He went public because nobody's been arrested, because Shakur's not gone. Days later, he was. No foul play was ever proven, but come on, the pattern was hard to ignore. Everyone who claimed to have real proof somehow disappeared before their story could be confirmed. Every single time. Even without Nice's testimony, the official story keeps falling apart. They said 40 caliber bullets hit Tupac at close range, but hospital accounts don't match up. Some witnesses swear he was awake and talking hours after the shooting, while others say he was rushed out before police could even confirm who he was. And if the injuries were truly fatal, how could he have been flown across borders just hours later? And let's not forget the so-called cremation, rumored to cost a staggering $3 million, paid in cash to make sure it happened instantly. That number makes 0 sense. No regular cremation costs anywhere near that much. It doesn't sound like someone paying to honor a life. It sounds like someone paying to make a person vanish. The deeper you look, the more everyone around this case seems trapped between tribute and secrecy. Take Suge Knight, the man behind the wheel of that BMW the night shots rang out. He spent decades bouncing between courtrooms, prison cells, and interviews, always dropping hints, but never giving straight answers.
As soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up and just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned.
Back in 2014, he even told a reporter, Shakur's not gone, he's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar. People brushed it off as typical Suge talk, but now, that quote hits different. Fast forward to early 2025. From behind bars, Knight launched his own podcast, Collect Call, and suddenly his tone changed. In one episode, he turned his attention straight towards Snoop Dogg, his former artist, and now the face of Death Row Records. Suge said point blank that Snoop's got a lot of explaining to do about what really went down in Las Vegas. He implied the version of events we've all believed might be a complete lie. That statement hit the industry like an explosion, because just a few years earlier, in 2022, Snoop had quietly bought Death Row Records in a deal that nobody fully understood. The amount, the buyers, the paperwork, it's all still a mystery. And the fact that Suge dropped those accusations right after that sale has people whispering that maybe Snoop didn't just buy a record label, maybe he bought silence. Their rivalry has always been legendary, but now it feels bigger than ego or business. It's starting to look like a fight over something much deeper: control over the truth behind Tupac Shakur's disappearance. Knight's Prison podcast has turned into a mix of subtle shots and bold questions. He keeps asking if Snoop's takeover of Death Row is really about honoring its legacy or rewriting its history. In one episode, Suge hinted that certain people tied to the label know exactly what went down that night in Vegas, and some of them made serious money by keeping their mouths shut. And now, old rumors are crawling back out of the shadows. Members of the Outlaws have accused Snoop of quietly dimming Tupac's legacy while pretending to celebrate it. Even director Alan Hughes, the man behind a documentary on the Shakur family, once said Snoop dimmed his light to let Shakur shine. Strange choice of words, right? Fans now think he wasn't just talking figuratively at all. Because if Tupac really did survive and go off the grid, somebody had to control the narrative. Someone had to run the label, manage the catalog, and move the money that was left behind.
Feel mad still that my brother, first of all, that's the...
And when you line everything up, the Rush cremation, the missing files, the insider's confession, and Suge's fresh accusations, it starts to look less like chaos and more like coordination. Every time a lead pops up, it gets buried under new headlines, or the person behind it suddenly disappears. But the most chilling twist doesn't come from 1996 or 2018, it comes from just last year. In 2023, a private investigator named Jimmy Poole posted online, claiming he had photographic proof that Tupac was alive and living in Belize. He uploaded 2 pictures of a man in his 40s who looked exactly like Pac chilling outside a beachfront cafe with a fan. Within 48 hours, those photos were gone. Poole's entire channel vanished, and his friend said he couldn't be reached. No investigation, no statement, no follow-up, just silence. Again. And that's when this story stopped feeling like myth and started feeling like menace. Because if Poole's evidence was real, that changes everything. It means Michael Nice wasn't the only one who knew Tupac was still alive. It means the network protecting him didn't fade away after the 90 seconds. It leveled up. The people who pulled off the escape might still be out there, guarding the secret and making sure that anyone who tries to expose it gets wiped from sight before they can say another word. The deeper we dig into Tupac's so-called death, the more it looks like a planned disappearance, and the more everyone tied to the truth seems to vanish or go silent. Jimmy Poole's 2023 revelation wasn't some clout-chasing stunt. He was a licensed private investigator who publicly claimed he had photographic proof of Tupac alive in Belize. The photos showed a man in his 40s, rocking the same sharp eyes, the same scar on his jaw, standing under the blazing sun beside a fan outside a little beach cafe. Poole posted them to his verified page with a caption promising more to come. But within 48 hours gone, the pictures vanished, his account went dark, and emails to him started bouncing back.
I'm saying everywhere we was going, we had to, keep our eyes open, 10 toes on.
People who tried calling said his number was disconnected, and just like Michael Nice before him, Poole disappeared right when his story was about to blow up. That can't be coincidence, it's too perfect. Both men, one an ex-security officer, the other a private investigator, claimed they had solid proof that Tupac survived. Both promised evidence about secret flights, fake bodies, and Cuban connections, and both went completely silent right before revealing their files. When you line up their timelines, it doesn't look random, it looks cleaned up, like someone was erasing the trail as soon as it got too close to the truth. Even Poole's last post hinted that something was wrong. He wrote, "Might need to go offline for safety reasons." That was the last thing anyone ever heard from him. No follow-up, no interview, no trace. And then there's the cash mystery, the $3 million payment for that so-called cremation. Who drops that kind of money for a simple procedure? That number was never confirmed in any public record, but multiple insiders close to the mortuary swore that a private transaction went down off the books. No invoices, all hush-hush. Whatever that payment really bought, it clearly wasn't just ashes, it was silence, and it's still echoing today. And right after that mysterious cremation, the worker in charge suddenly retired, packed up, and moved out of state, gone without a trace. No farewell message, no interview, no record of where he went. It's like he got paid to disappear right along with the very body he claimed to cremate. Meanwhile, the justice system tried to sell the illusion of closure, but it all felt like theater. In 2023, prosecutors finally charged former gang member Dwayne "Kefe" D. Davis with Tupac's murder. But even that move came with red flags. They didn't push for the maximum penalty, and they avoided a public trial that could have dragged other names into the spotlight. It felt like a controlled detonation, just loud enough to make headlines, but quiet enough to keep the deeper truth buried. Then comes Suge Knight, the only living witness inside that BMW. From behind bars, he refused to testify. He told reporters, "Kef D's a childhood friend. I wouldn't wish prison on my worst enemy. That's not loyalty, that's protection."
We had to stay heated and make sure that we protected ourselves, you know what I'm saying?
The same man who once ruled the most feared label in hip-hop is now shielding the guy accused of taking out his biggest artist. Why would he do that? Maybe the real answer isn't in what happened after the shooting, but in what was already building before it. Because those last few months of Tupac's life were pure chaos, a psychological war zone, not just against East Coast rivals, but inside Death Row itself. By early 1996, the label that once promised him freedom started feeling like a golden cage. Tupac had begun to see the cracks, the late-night calls from executives, the missing royalty checks, the endless surveillance. Friends said he was restless, paranoid, and convinced that people close to him were playing both sides. To outsiders, he looked unstoppable, creative, confident, larger than life, but inside, he was breaking down, believing the people he trusted most were setting him up. And the first sign of that inner war spilled into the public when tension between him and Snoop Dogg hit the surface. Just weeks before the Vegas shooting, they were deep in a silent Cold War. Tupac feeling betrayed after hearing Snoop's radio interviews where he praised Biggie and Diddy. That moment didn't just spark tension, it cracked open the fragile trust inside Death Row Records. And from that point on, it wasn't just East Coast versus West Coast anymore, it was family turning on family. These were the same people Tupac believed had tried to take his life, and inside Death Row, that kind of suspicion was straight up treason. This wasn't just about loyalty anymore, it was about survival. In a world where one wrong alliance could get you erased, people close to the label said Snoop started backing away, quietly meeting with outside lawyers and exploring new business moves. To Tupac, that was confirmation of his worst fear, that Suge Knight's so-called brotherhood was cracking apart and everyone was securing their own safety net. Behind the scenes, things were getting darker by the day. Studio workers remembered those tense recording sessions, doors slamming, voices raised, Tupac accusing Suge of stealing money and playing games with his accounts. He couldn't understand how his albums were making millions, yet he was constantly broke. And when he found out the finances were being handled by men with mob connections, he lost it. He didn't hide his rage, he shouted, flipped furniture, and swore he'd walk away from Death Row the minute his contract expired. The music, he said, was his escape route, but by then, the walls were already closing in. Tupac had started planning his next move, launching his own label, taking control of his masters, and cutting out everyone he didn't trust. If he'd actually gone independent, it would have blown the lid off everything, exposing the secret investors, the hidden cash, and the shadowy names behind Death Row's money flow. Then came that breaking point one summer night. Witnesses whispered about a violent argument inside a West Hollywood studio where Tupac shouted, "You're bleeding me dry." It wasn't just an outburst, it was open rebellion. That moment sent shockwaves through the entire label. His words, his anger, his threat to go public, it all echoed like a warning shot. By the next morning, some higher-ups were already talking about how to contain him, scared that he'd expose their operation to the world. Over the next few weeks, the energy at Death Row went ice cold. Bodyguards were swapped out with no reason, meetings got canceled, and suddenly Tupac's phone line, his one link to family and friends, was being monitored. And when you see it from that angle, the Vegas shooting stops looking like some random hit on a superstar. It starts to feel like the final move in a deadly power struggle that had been boiling inside Death Row all along. By that point, Tupac wasn't just an artist, he was a problem. A man who knew where every dollar came from, who it passed through, and whose hands it really ended up in. He wasn't a cash cow anymore. He was a liability, a ticking time bomb, holding the map to Death Row's darkest secrets. If the rumors are true, his disappearance wasn't just about getting away from East Coast rivals. It was about saving himself from the people inside his own circle. Think about it. Maybe Tupac didn't fake his death to escape the world's eyes. Maybe he vanished to escape the men who once called him brother. Men who had already decided he was worth more dead than alive. That's where the lines blur between loyalty, silence, and profit. Because once money and power are involved, friendship turns into business, and in business, everyone's expendable. Fast forward to 2022. The world cheers as Snoop Dogg announces he's officially bought Death Row Records, a full-circle moment. A legendary artist returning to the label that helped define an entire era. The media spun it as a comeback story, a redemption arc, a feel-good headline. But behind those flashy headlines, the details didn't line up. There was no disclosed price, no record of who financed it, no list of what assets were included in the sale. And the most shocking part? The iconic Death Row catalog, the heart of its empire, the master recordings that made it legendary, wasn't even part of the initial deal. That alone raised red flags across the industry. Insiders began whispering that someone else might have quietly financed the whole thing, not to revive Death Row, but to control it to make sure certain files, tapes, and contracts stayed buried forever. Some even said the buyout was never about nostalgia, it was about damage control. about locking away pieces of history that could reopen old wounds or expose who really pulled the strings in the final days of Tupac's life. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. From behind prison walls in 2025, Suge Knight dropped a bomb on his podcast, Collect Call. Out of nowhere, he called out Snoop by name, no filters, no hesitation. "What did you buy? Show me the paperwork," he demanded, his voice heavy with that same menace he carried in the 90 seconds. To casual fans, it sounded like Suge was just being Suge, loud, bitter, and still stuck in the past. But to people following the Shakur case, that moment sent chills down their spine. It wasn't random, it felt calculated, like a message wrapped in attitude. It sounded like Suge was saying, "This isn't about ego, it's about erasure." Was he hinting that the 2022 death row sale wasn't just a business move, but a cover-up? Was the deal designed to bury records, clean up old names, and scrub away traces of what really went down in Vegas? Because when you start connecting the dots, the sealed financials, the missing catalog, and the sudden silence from everyone involved, it starts to look like history being rewritten in real time. Snoop's acquisition was supposed to be the rebirth of a legend, but the deeper you look, the more it feels like someone bought Death Row not to revive it, but to rewrite it. And Suge's question, "What did you buy?" suddenly doesn't sound rhetorical anymore. It sounds like a challenge, a warning, like he knows there's more buried inside that deal than the public was ever meant to see. Because if the Death Row archives really hold documents, contracts, or unreleased footage tied to Tupac's last days, whoever owns them now controls the narrative of one of hip-hop's greatest mysteries. Maybe this isn't just about who killed Tupac, maybe it's about who owns his truth. Because buried inside Death Row's assets weren't just songs and royalties, they were the receipts, contracts, tapes, and internal letters that could reveal who really managed Tupac's final recordings and how the money flowed after he disappeared. And if those files were sealed away or quietly bought out, that means the story could be controlled forever. The truth wouldn't die, it would be managed. Even Snoop's own words hit different now. Years ago, he said he dimmed his light so Shakur could shine. Back then, it sounded like respect, a brotherly gesture between two icons. But now, it feels colder, darker. Because if Tupac's exit was planned to clear the stage for someone else, that phrase takes on a whole new meaning. Did he dim his light, or was Tupac's light switched off so another could rise? Former Outlaws member Napoleon once said Snoop had grown jealous of Tupac's dominance at Death Row, and director Alan Hughes repeated the same eerie line. Snoop dimmed his light. It's like everyone involved agreed to use the same coded explanation, one that sounds less like tribute and more like confession. When you start connecting these threads, the missing witnesses, the vanishing evidence, the strange money trails, the fake legal moves, and those hush-hush corporate deals, it paints a picture that's way bigger than any simple theory. This doesn't look like chaos, it looks coordinated. A carefully managed disappearance protected by men who built empires off Tupac's name. Every decade, there's a new twist, another exclusive confession, another break in the case, another indictment that fades away before the truth comes out. And every single person who gets too close either backs off or disappears. Tupac's so-called death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a full-blown operation. One that took serious money, silent witnesses, and a record label that quietly changed hands to keep the real story locked away. So maybe the question isn't did Tupac fake his death, maybe it's who helped him pull it off, who profited from it, and who's still protecting that secret almost 30 years later. Because if people this powerful are still covering tracks after all this time, you've got to wonder, what else are they hiding? Maybe the real story of Tupac Shakur isn't finished, it's just waiting for the next brave soul to dig it up and finally tell it. Until that day comes, the mystery lives on and so does the legend. What do you think really happened to Tupac? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you want the truth to keep coming, share this with someone who's still questioning the story, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into hip-hop's biggest mysteries. Stay curious, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next one.